and welcome to Goldsmith Weighs In. On the anniversary of JFK's assassination 60 years ago today, he just landed in Dallas probably 15 minutes ago, and he's shaking hands with the crowd, and pretty soon he's going to get into his limousine and head on the infamous motorcade through Dallas. Now, that day was a day in infamy. It changed the entire world, the trajectory of the United States, and a great deal of other things. I'd like to go through all that with you. You're going to be the American grand jury. You're going to be the people who will decide, was it a lone nut gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, who took the president's life, or was it a pretty vast conspiracy of a lot of different agencies and individuals who wanted to remove the president for his own or their own agenda? I will tell you that we're standing on the hands or the shoulders of hundreds, if not thousands, of researchers who have dedicated their life to doing perhaps the most intensive investigation into a crime that's ever happened in the history of mankind. We have to thank the authors, people like Jim Marrs of Crossfire, Charles Brandt, Suppressing the Truth in Dallas, Last Word by Mark Lane, and Deep Politics Death, JFK, and that's by Peter Scott, and hundreds of other authors who have dedicated their life, and researchers, countless hours, to trying to bring into focus the truth of what happened on that day back in Dallas, November 22nd, 1963. I'd like to start off by saying that both Bobby and Jackie Kennedy thought LBJ had been involved in JFK's death. Jackie had some tapes in her safe that she left indicating just that. Bobby had believed that from the beginning, and he had overheard that LBJ and others may have been involved in his brother's death. Now, an interesting thing that I'd like to bring up here is that Lee Harvey Oswald, while he's in jail for the shooting of JFK, actually made one last phone call, which he was legally allowed to do. Now, that last phone call were to an Army intelligence officer, and they had had three phone secretaries on staff that night, and two of them were on their switchboards, and the supervisor of Miss Louise Sweeney answered the call for Lee Harvey Oswald, and at just that time, two agents walked in. They were identified as law enforcement agents and told her that she could answer the call but not put it through. So that's exactly what she did. She waited a few moments, went back online with Lee Harvey Oswald and said, "I'm very sorry," but nobody answered, which of course was untrue. So the other two ladies who were on staff that night, a Miss Alveda Treon and her daughter, decided they would keep the phone call slip as part of history. Well, that phone call slip, a researcher actually found out about the slip 5 years later, looked them up, and checked out the phone numbers. And those were numbers that went to a gentleman that was head of the investigation department for the Army. So he was kind of a undercover agent or a spy or whatever you want to call him, and that's the call that was not put through. Now, if you were a person who had assassinated the president, would you make that kind of call? If it was me, I probably wouldn't. Now, to ensure that the investigation of 2 or more people was not involved, because if it was, then it would have been a federal conspiracy, and guess who would have been in charge of that? That would have been now the territory of Bobby Kennedy, and it would have been a whole different kind of investigation. So within 14 minutes of the president being shot, well, the description of Lee Harvey Oswald is put out over all the police radios. Even though a police officer had went up to the 6th-story depository and saw Lee Harvey Oswald in the cafeteria drinking a Coke and had eliminated him and went on, that description went out within 14 minutes. And within 24 hours, actually they say within 2 hours, J. Edgar Hoover had decided who had done it. How he did, I don't know, and issued to his FBI force to put out a statement the next day that once they had gotten Lee Harvey Oswald in the theater and in jail, that was the prime suspect and they had to look no further. Real important reason for doing that, of course, is to keep the investigation in Texas where they could control it. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald was recruited straight out of the Army into the Naval Intelligence School. And the FBI was paying him, when we're getting to the Dallas era and the area where he was working in New Orleans, they were paying him $250 a month to work for their undercover agent and give them information on the Fair Play for Cuba movement. And the CIA also paid him now and then, so they must have considered him an asset. And what they say is that the researchers that have looked into this says Lee Harvey Oswald had the fingerprints of the intelligence community all over him. But our prime suspect and the person who benefited most from this is LBJ. Now, LBJ became president on the flight back to Washington from Dulles Field. And in 1963, here's the environment that LBJ was looking at. First of all, he was facing a criminal indictment for the Bobby Baker case. That's his assistant and his right-hand man in the Senate, as well as criminal indictment for a fraud case involving an agricultural scheme that included his partner, Billy Solestis, where they were basically taking agricultural crops, renting warehouses, some that existed, some that didn't, but putting no crops in it and charging the government millions of dollars. That case had been uncovered by an agricultural agent by the name of Henry Marshall. Now, Henry Marshall found out about the scheme, and LBJ, to keep this guy quiet, offered him a very big job in Washington, D.C. Now, Henry Marshall was a man of character and refused the bribe to stay quiet. He was found with 5 bullets to the stomach. A friendly coroner ruled it was a suicide. How you do that, I do not know. And Billy Solestis said later LBJ had ordered his personal hitman, Malcolm Wallace, to do the hit. Malcolm Wallace is the same guy who has a fingerprint, the only fingerprint, that they were able to find in the 6th-story sniper's nest of the school books depository. So it had a 14-point match, and the FBI will arrest anybody that's got an 8-point match on a crime if there's a fingerprint that's got 8 points on it. Excuse me. Later, they took a look at this, and it made it a 27-point match. However, as usual, the FBI said, It was not credible. So Kennedy's had lost the election to LBJ. I mean, LBJ and Kennedy had lost the election, had won the election, and lost it to Richard Nixon in 1960. And the next election was coming up in 1964. LBJ finds out from, we believe, Richard Nixon, who had lost to Kennedy, that LBJ was going to be left off of the ticket in 1964. Kennedy had somebody else in mind. So there's LBJ with a fraud indictment in the Senate, and he's got the criminal indictment with Billy Sol Estes, and now he's going to be left off of the ticket in 1964, just 6 months later, or 9 months. So if you're LBJ, you're looking at either life imprisonment, possibly, or being completely out of power for the first time in a long, long time. So that is a situation or the backdrop for what's to occur next. Now, he goes to a party the night before that this motorcade is going to start, and he goes with his mistress, a lady named Madeline Brown. And they are attended by his good friend and neighbor in Washington, J. Edgar Hoover. What he was doing there, I do not know. And Richard Nixon and some other mob associates. And here's what he said when he left that party. He said to Madeline Brown, "Those goddamn Kennedys, after tomorrow they'll never embarrass me again. That's not a threat, that's a promise." And of course it came true. Now, it's not easy to kill a sitting president and get away with it. I mean, you're going to need some help. So we got the CIA that's been in bed with the mafia for quite a while now, working on a well-planned scheme to kill Fidel Castro. They wanted Castro out of there and the communists out of there. And the mob wanted their casinos back. So they had some good incentives to go through all this. They wanted to kill Castro. They wanted to blame it on the anti-Castro groups. And they codenamed this whole plan to murder Castro Mongoose. And the way they were going to bury all the investigation on it and keep the classified documents concerning all this secret, where they were going to say, well, we can't release anything because it could cause World War III with the Russians, who we had just came close to World War III the year before. Now, that must kind of sound familiar because they haven't released any documents that are really the ones everybody wants to see on the Kennedy assassination. The classified ones that aren't redacted completely. And their excuse is always national security. It could be grounds for a world war. So that's their excuse, but they're using an excuse that they had already thought up in this Mongoose plan, which was exceedingly well planned, detailed, and had all the right people in place that could do the assassination. So we got rogue CIA agents, mob associates, and what they did when they decided to kill Kennedy, and here's how that came about. RFK was brutally going after Jimmy Hoffa, the Teamster Union boss, to the point that he was going to go to jail. So he was already close in with the mob, Marcellus, out of New Orleans, and Traficante out of Florida. And he told his attorney, when you go to meet with these guys, tell them, I want you to hit RFK. I want this off our backs. This guy's going to put us all in jail. Well, the attorney went to that meeting, and what Carlos Marcellus said was this: why cut off the tail? head's going to just turn around and bite you even worse. Let's cut off the head, and then the tail can no longer function properly. That's exactly how the plan went forward. So they took the mongoose plan that is already in place, the same mafia guys that were already associated, like Johnny Roselli and CIA agents that were already working on this, and they turned that plan around, and they used it on JFK. And that's exactly the plan that they carried out, exactly to the letter of the way they wanted Mongoose to go, and they buried all those documents for 60 years based on the same excuse. Gee, we can't let that out. The American public can't handle it, and we're probably going to start World War III. Now, Kennedy, a few months prior, had made it clear, we're getting out of Vietnam. That's it. He already had did a what's called a national security memorandum that said we are going to withdraw from Southeast Asia and not getting involved in a war, and we're going to take out 1,000 people now, and we're going to take out 16,000 people later. And everybody that's in the military will be out of Vietnam within a few months after my next election, which was in '64. Well, that was memorandum number 263. And of course, there was another memorandum, and it was called 273. Now, 273 is an interesting memorandum. It was created by a committee with individual that signed off on it, and it was ready and put on his desk 2 days before Dallas trip by Kennedy. Kennedy knew nothing about this memorandum from what we can find out. NASM 273 was prepared just 2 days before the trip to Dallas that the U.S. would keep its commitment to support Vietnam any way it could and set the stage for going back in and starting the Vietnam War escalation. Now, the military complex, that's what they've been pushing Kennedy to do for the last couple of years. That's what they wanted. The chief of staff, McNamara, all of them, they wanted this war in the worst way. And, of course, it would have made a lot of companies like Huey Helicopter, who LBJ had a lot of stock in, and other companies, a tremendous amount of money. Wars are profitable for some people. So LBJ, the first thing he did after 72 hours after JFK was shot was what? He signed NASM 273. The military complex got what they wanted. That, in my opinion, is a smoking gun. Now, who else may have been involved and knew it would happen and stood by and let the 35th President of the United States get assassinated? Well, these are the usual suspects, let's say. The oil barons and their depletion tax, they were going to lose that oil depletion tax. It's about 15%, which meant $25 million or more dollars a year. And the big oil barons like H.L. Hunt, Clint Murchison, and other guys out there that were these gigantic wealthy oil guys were looking for any way in the world to get out of paying that tax or not having it rescinded. Kennedy already told them they were going to rescind it. So you got H.L. Hunt, you got Clint Murchison, you got the oil barons. Now, H.L. Hunt just happened to be the main backer of LBJ since he started his political career. And he may have been one of the guys that was nudging LBJ along, because LBJ was just one single heartbeat away from being president. And that's how they convinced him to be vice president. and give up the job of Speaker of the House. He did it because they said, LBJ, you're 1 second, 1 heartbeat away from being the next president of the United States. He wanted that intensely. He had ran for the office twice and failed. And he knew if he was out of power and these criminal indictments came, and I believe it was Life magazine was going to do an expose in December. We're in November, going to release an expose in December outlining all of this stuff from the Bobby Baker and the Billy Solestis case. He would be through. Done. And they decided not to release it after LBJ was president for fear of reprisal. So it was put back in the vault. Now, you've got the oil barons. Now, the next one's going to surprise you. And please, I want to preface this as saying I am not anti-Semitic. I'm the furthest from it. Israel was a new young nation at that time. And Ben-Gurion was their prime minister, and they had a project called Dimona that was building a nuclear facility, but they were secretly building an atom bomb. They wanted it so intensely because they felt that this was the only thing that would allow their young nation to actually survive and not have any worries about going into the future if they had that kind of weapon. Now, Kennedy was very adamant that he was against any kind of nuclear proliferation. And he was inspecting this Dimona facility every 6 months. They even led him to a fake facility once to try to steer him off of it. And the letters back and forth got very intense. And he basically said to Ben-Gurion, if you want the U.S. continued support or any money from us for Israel, you'll give up your nuclear ambitions to have an A-bomb. This upset Ben-Gurion so much that he resigned and he focused completely on getting the A-bomb. He was very good friends with Mickey Cohen, a big mobster out of Los Angeles and Hollywood. And when they met, he was overheard saying, what are we going to do about this Kennedy guy? And Meyer Lansky. Now, Meyer Lansky happens to be at the head of the commission of the entire syndicate, crime syndicate in the United States. So guess what? I don't care if you're Traficante, if you're Sam Giancana out of Chicago, or if you're Marcellus out of New Orleans, if you want to hit somebody like the president, you would have to go to the commission or the syndicate and with Meyer Lansky and get their green light, go ahead and blessing. Or you're the next on the hit list. It's that simple. So Meyer Lansky had to be involved, and he was an ardent supporter of Israel. He was a big supporter. He raised a lot of money for him. Same with Mickey Cohen. They raised a lot of money for him. So when they came and looked at the situation and this idea that JFK might be hit, they either got involved in it, and the rumor is that they actually had their Mossad, which is their secret service division, go out and pick one of the assassins, a guy by the name of Lucian Sarti out of Sicily. It was suggested by Santos Traficante, who had good connections in the French connection and the Sicilian mob. But it's believed that Mossad picked this guy because they wanted to make sure that the job was done right. So that's the rumor. They either knew about it or they participated in it. Either way, if they knew about it and let it happen, not good from a very close ally, and if they participated in it, even worse. So that's the Israel connection. And don't blame me for bringing it up. I'm just the messenger. Let's see. Now, finally, and this is the big one. JFK had looked at the Federal Reserve and decided, why are we borrowing money and paying interest on our own money? Why don't we print it ourselves for the government? And he looked into it and he found that the Federal Reserve was made up 9 very, very wealthy banks and the Rothschilds, who had figured out long ago, I don't care who makes the laws as long as I can print the money. And Ishmael Rothschild, who started this back in the 1760s, said money can buy anything. And what money can't buy, a lot of money can buy. And if you cannot be influenced by money, you can be easily eradicated for a small amount of money. That was the original Rothschilds who thought up this scheme of being the person who prints the money and charge interest on it. Now, Kennedy had said, looked at the law closely and said, we can print our own money. We'll use our own silver. They've eliminated the gold thing, but let's use our silver in the Treasury and print our own money. So he puts out $4 billion worth of notes in circulation. This would have crippled the Federal Reserve. Now, 4 sitting presidents have been killed trying to do exactly what Kennedy was trying to do, print our own money and not pay interest on it. Starting with Lincoln, Garfield, I think McKinley. Anyway, 4 sitting presidents have been killed when they decided to print the money. 6 months, actually 5 months after Kennedy did it and put money out, he died. Were they participants, or were they just the fabulous, wealthy power brokers, the bankers, who had the inside track and maybe helped fund getting rid of a president that was going to destroy their business? That's my take on it. Did they participate anyway, but financially? Probably not. But we now owe $34 trillion in debt. How much of that is interest? And who's getting it? I got a feeling a few of those shekels are ending up in Rothschild's pocket, or dollars. Now, that's the power brokers, the bankers, the Rothschilds behind them. That's another group. So what do we have here? We got a young, vital president that's trying to change things for America for the better, keep us out of war, save us money, make America the leader in the world through going to the moon and the space race and bringing on civil rights. He was strongly for that. And he met with Martin Luther King many, many times. So we got a young, vital president that's trying to do a lot of things that a lot of powerful people and organizations are not happy with. The CIA, for example, Dulles, Allen Dulles, after the Bay of Pigs that failed miserably, because JFK would not send in air support, was fired. He had a group around him that hated Kennedy. He had one of them that he was having an affair with his wife. Cord, I believe, is his name. And Kennedy began having a long affair with him. Kennedy was a pretty randy guy. He got around pretty good. So they didn't like Kennedy. You got the mob who hates this guy's guts because Bobby's trying to put him in jail, and they helped get him elected. They put him over the top. He only won 1% ahead of Nixon, and that's because Giancana got all the Chicago unions to vote for Kennedy because the old man, Joe Kennedy, had asked him to. And, of course, the old man Joe Kennedy was a robber baron and a bootlegger himself. He knew these guys really well. So they pushed him over the top. The first thing that Kennedy does, he puts Bobby Kennedy in as Attorney General and tells him, go after the mob. Let's get these guys. And J. Edgar Hoover hadn't done anything about the mob in decades. They think because they may have had a little evidence about him being gay, and maybe he was in debt to some of their racetracks bets. So J. Edgar Hoover was hands off on the mafia, didn't even agree that there was a syndicated crime organization in the country until the 52 mobsters were arrested up in Appalachia having a meeting. Then he had to say, yeah, well, I guess there is an organization. Okay, so you got all these guys that are not happy. The CIA, you got the Joint Chiefs of Staff that want their war in Vietnam. They got it. You've got the oil barons that do not want that depletion tax to come through. And, of course, it didn't. You got the Federal Reserve within 9 months after he was, by 66, they had clawed back all the Treasury notes that JFK had put out, all of them. And by a few years later, they had that law completely withdrawn so they could never do it again. So we don't print our own money, and a lot of other nations don't, because that's the way that the robber barons, the power brokers, the giant banks, the Rothschilds wanted it, and they got to keep it that way pretty well. So now, the stage is set for an assassination of our 35th president. And he's in the motorcade. And everybody loves this guy. I mean, they knew Dallas was a hot spot, but for some reason, they decided to leave the Secret Service agents that run alongside the automobile when the president's in it back at Love Field in Dallas. Back. And you can see them in the video going, what the hell? They left them on the tarmac. If they hadn't, they had been running right alongside where the president's head was. It would have made it a lot more difficult to kill this guy. Somebody on the Secret Service had to know something. That's my opinion, and other people's opinion as well. Now, the military complex has a change of heart and sends out a abort team with a guy named Tosh Plumley, who's a CIA pilot, and a team of people who's supposed to go in and stop this assassination from happening. They had already planned it in 3 places. Chicago had a hit team and a patsy, and the landlady found the guns and the cops come calling. That was done. Tampa, they were going to kill the president there. That's right in Traficante's backyard. And they had a patsy there too, and they had a team, but he picked his Secret Service made him take a helicopter to his event where he was going to speak instead of a motorcade. Couldn't do it there. Now Dallas is their last shot to get Kennedy. And hazmat plane that comes in carrying these CIA and these abort guys get out. They're gung-ho to abort this, including Tosh Plumley. He goes along with them. And they actually find the guy who's head of the assassination team for the mob, a guy by the name of Charles Chucky Nicoletti. And they go to him and say, look, they'd like you to call this off. And they talk a while. And when he leaves, the guy who pulled the trigger behind the grassy knoll fence, a guy by the name of James Files, who's confessed to that, and actually bit down on a bullet and left it, and they found it, some amateur archaeologist, some 15 years later in the dirt, and it had the teeth marks. They matched him up to James Files, and they haven't found him saying one thing that they could prove to not be the truth. Like he went out with Lee Harvey Oswald to do some shooting at a shooting range, where they met with Jack Ruby at his club or at a place, and that's where they got all these credentials as Secret Service and FBI. So when police ran around the fence, all they did was show that Secret Service badge or FBI badge and say, no, we got this all covered. That's how they contained the shooting scene. And the guy simply folded up his little gun, which and put it into a box where they keep railway equipment, and just walked off, got into a car and left. But you've got these guys, and they're talking to this abort team with Taj Plumlee, and when they walk away, James Files asked Chuck Nicoletti, who was his mentor. He was just a very low-level associate of the mob, this James Files. But he asked him, are we going to call it off? And Nicoletti said this, according to Files. Look, if the boss in Chicago doesn't call it off, meaning Giancana, then it's not getting called off. So it went ahead as planned. Now, they try to say that there were three shooters. I'm sorry, one assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, shooting 3 bullets. And it's my belief, from my research and everybody else's, there may have been as many as 6 shooters. Let me lay those out for you. You've got Johnny Roselli, who came in on the hazmat plane. He was a mob boss for Las Vegas, but he was part of the Chicago outfit. Everybody liked him, including the CIA, and he was the front man for getting the mob into the CIA to help kill Castro. So he knew all those guys. That's how he got a ride, asked for a ride and got it. And he got a ride with a Cuban guy. The Cuban's guy name is, let's see, Cuban guy. Do you have the Cuban guy you can bring up there? No, that's Chuck Nicoletti. He was in charge of, there he is, a guy named Hermino Diaz. He was probably the companion of Johnny Roselli and also an expert marksman, and may have been the hitman for the Cubans. An interesting thing here, this is very interesting to me. Fidel Castro wanted to know what was going on in the United States, knew they had tried to kill him a few times and just barely missed, and he had his radio satellites aimed at Washington, D.C. to pick up any information that they could from radio, news, so forth. The day before the assassination, he turns all these satellites and antennas towards Dallas. He had to know, didn't he? Now, you got Johnny Roselli. You got Diaz. You got those guys are supposedly in the water drain with a clear shot as a limousine goes by of shooting up through the water drain slit right into the front of JFK. You've got James Files behind the grassy knoll. You can see the puff of smoke. You can make him out in that picture that's so famous. He was there. He admits it. He left a bullet casing with his teeth marks on it. He explained exactly in detail every minute of that. He was in prison when they found the bullet for 50 years for shooting a cop. Now, you got Nicoletti, who's supposed to be in the Caltech building right behind the school book depository. I have done that a few times. The school book depository, he's in the Caltech building right behind it. Supposedly, there's somebody else in the Caltech building. They think a woman, so, women are coming into their own pretty strong. And at that time, this lady was supposedly in an office where she pulled the gun on the second floor out of the top of a casing, shot, put it back, and went back to typing. Whether that's true or not, I do not know, but that's the story. There was either somebody on the second floor, there was Nicoletti, and there may have been somebody on the roof. Now, the president's first shot, if you can show that, comes from the front. Not from the back, from the front. Now, the bullet hole in the windshield proves that. That bullet hole could only have come from the front. It could not have come from the back and then went through Kennedy, went into Connolly's leg, and then back up and cracked through the window. Not a chance. It had to be a very high velocity bullet, and it had to come from the front. Where exactly? I'm not 100% certain, but here's the possibilities. Way down at the end of the grassy knolls at the end of the fence, that's one. The parking lot way over to the right, almost on the other side, beyond the other freeway, right over there, there's cars. You see those cars? A good marksman could make it from there, and also the post office. You couldn't have done it from the overpass. You couldn't have done it anywhere there were too many people. So it had to be the post office. It had to be from one of those parked cars. That's where it had to be. Or there was another location that gave him a good enough line of sight to make that through the windshield shot. I think that was Louis Sarti. That's our Sicilian boy that was handpicked by Mossad to make sure the job got done correctly. Now, how many shooters is that? We got Roselli and Diaz, that's two. We've got, I forgot one. We've got Stiles, we got Nicoletti, maybe a woman, and another shooter that's coming from the parking lot or the post office for the next shot. There's one more. How about LBJ's personal hitman, Malcolm Wallace? Supposedly, he takes the freight elevator with one other person, a lady named Ruth, by the way, up there, Ruth Hall, I think. And he gets the rifle that probably Lee Harvey Oswald planted there, was told to plant there, not knowing he was going to end up the patsy. Supposedly, he takes the shot from the 6th floor depository and leaves his print on the box next to the window, and then takes off after the shots and goes back down the freight elevator. In the time that this is happening, Lee Harvey Oswald, believe it or not, is standing in the doorway. That's him, watching the motorcade go by. Now, they have done everything in the world to try to disprove this and blame it was another employee. But if the president was going by and you wanted to see it, you had to be in the doorway. They got a picture of it. That's Lee Harvey Oswald. They did facial recognition. They did clothing recognition. They did every recognition you can think of to try to disprove that that was Lee Harvey Oswald in the doorway of the school book depository as the motorcade was going by. Now, he couldn't have been in two places. He could not have been down there, then having a Coke leisurely in the cafeteria, and be upstairs on the 6th floor of the depository in the sniper's nest, shooting perfectly accurately in 5.3 seconds, 3 bullets that 2 of them hit their mark. Just doesn't make any sense, does it? Now, that's 6, isn't it? That's 6 people. Sound effects from the open motorcycle have identified at least 4 to 6 shots. The chip that hit the pavement that actually wounded somebody in Dealey Plaza had to be another shot. They think they can account for at least 4 out of the 6 shots. In any event, obviously, the scene where the president grabs his throat is the first scene that everybody sees that the president is in trouble. He grabs his throat and says, I think he said, "Oh my God." And Connally, when he gets hit, says they're going to kill us all. Oh my God, they're going to kill us all. Those were the last words of the president. Now, of course, mayhem breaks out everywhere. They don't know why that limousine slowed down to where its parking lights actually came on, but they think the umbrella man that put the umbrella up right at that, and you're not allowed in a presidential limousine to slow down to the point that he slowed down. But he may have been the guy that put up the signal that says, hey, this is the right location, the right time, and the car is slowed down. But it's slowed down enough to where they could see the parking lots. Now, strangely, 2 cars back, there's LBJ with somebody else, and he's now down on the floorboard, they say, with a microphone. They could never get his associate to discuss what he was saying on that microphone. But he had already ducked before the first shot, according to witnesses. Whether that's true or not, I cannot say, but that's the rumor. Now, the president's shot. He goes to Parkland Hospital. They try to save his life. He's pronounced dead shortly after 1 o'clock on November 22nd, 1963. And the medical team notices that there's a side of his head that is blowing off the size of your hand, 5 or 6 inches. And there's a bullet hole. The nurse and the doctor both say that is a front entry bullet hole. Half his skull is cracked in numerous fragments. It's just demolished on the x-rays. They will not allow, of course, the body to stay at Parkland. So the Secret Service bullies their way through, takes the casket, gets it over to Love Field, and gets it on a plane where LBJ is quickly, very quickly made to give the oath of presidency. There's Jacqueline Kennedy that's been forced to come up front to witness it. She's got blood all over her outfit. That outfit, by the way, she said, I want them to see what they've done. That outfit is set aside for 75 years. Nobody will see it because obviously today's forensic with blood splatter and all that would be able to tell exactly where that shot came from. Anyway, he is now president. The body of President Kennedy is now in the back of the Air Force One. They're off to the Bethesda Naval Hospital. Interesting thing happens when they get there. The casket that they had put in, big bronze casket they had to take the handles off of, becomes an almost Vietnam military-style casket, and the military has an autopsy below where they're going to have the official autopsy for an hour and a half to 2 hours, maybe even more, before it goes upstairs. When it goes upstairs, it's now back in a beautiful casket. Now, 6 Marines who carried that casket have testified to this, as well as people who did that military operation. They take it upstairs, give it to a doctor who had low ranking, the military could control, who had never performed an autopsy in his life. And he was in charge of doing the autopsy on the President of the United States. First thing they find is that there's a bunch of metal fragments in the brain, and what looks like mercury. And they find that the head wound is not the big one that they saw now. Now that's been kind of all patched up, it's more in line with where the shot was supposed to come from, and not the side where you can see in the Zapruder film, side, back, from the side, back. Nope, none of that. Right in the back. And now the throat wound has been sliced open, and they said it was a tracheotomy now. Not a bullet hole, it's a tracheotomy. His hair was put back in a lot better shape than he was when he left Parkland. And all the people at Parkland testified that to this day, they do not agree with the autopsy pictures that they took against what was taken at Bethesda. Now, they took hundreds of photographs, tons of x-rays, and the mercury that they were seeing was coming from that exploding bullet fired by that Fireball rifle, a Remington Fireball, that used that kind of ammunition, and it was an exploding bullet with mercury, and that's the fragments that they're seeing. And those x-rays were confiscated. All the photographs were confiscated by the FBI. And the president's brain goes missing. The president's brain goes missing. The FBI went up to Robert Kennedy and said, gee, you know, they would really like to have the brain to study it. And Robert Kennedy, I guess, agreed in some fashion, and the brain went missing. Now, the FBI's job, it seems to me, since J. Edgar Hoover had decided who had killed Kennedy himself and had his guys make sure that they reported it so it could stay into Texas where they could control it, now wanted to control the autopsy, which they did. They grabbed everything that they wanted to suppress and keep away. They never got it back. Not one journalist, not one photographer, none of the x-rays, nor the brain. Now, I don't know about you, but that, to me, is more than highly suspicious. And the word goes out, or the research goes out, that the Warren Commission was not there to investigate this assassination properly. They eliminated a lot of witnesses that could have added to it, cherry-picked them. They were there to substantiate the narrative that there was a lone gunman. And the evidence and the hearing had to support that if it was going to go through and stop there. That's what the Warren Commission was for. Guess who was on it? Allen Dulles, other guys that hated Kennedy's guts were right on that commission. And the FBI actually changed the testimony or eliminated it for some witnesses to make sure that the narrative of the lone gunman was followed. They had to make, at the very least, J. Edgar Hoover right in his assumption. At the worst, they were covering up the worst crime and cover-up in our nation's history after Lincoln. Now, it's done. They've done the autopsy. LBJ signs the order, NASM 273. Let's get this war on the road. So, what's the aftermath of all of this? Well, the aftermath, by the way, could we go back before we go to this? Could we go back to the rifle that killed Kennedy, supposedly? They ran, this is little known knowledge, they ran all kinds of tests on the rifle, couldn't find any fingerprints. According to the coroner, I mean, the guy who worked at the embalming place, said 2 agents came in and spent the better part of 2 hours trying to get a good thumbprint off of Lee Harvey Oswald's dead hand onto that rifle, which amazingly they found a thumbprint later. The lady who checked in the gun said she don't even think that's the gun she checked in. She thought it was a .273 Caracano rifle, not a whatever the one they had. So there's a little bit of discrepancy on the rifle. Here's the interesting thing. They tested Lee Harvey Oswald with paraffin tests, neutron tests, schematics, every way it could be tested. They could not find anything that would indicate that Lee Harvey Oswald fired a rifle that day. And at the end of the day, he is probably exactly what he said. He was the patsy. And he had to be eliminated. Now, that's an interesting story, too. He had met with Ruby once or twice. He had met with James Files, so he is obviously in there. Maybe he was an asset for the CIA. Maybe he was working with the FBI, but he was in there. But he did not shoot anybody, according to him, and the evidence seems to support that. Now, was he accomplice? Obviously, if he took that rifle to the 6th floor, he was an accomplice, no doubt. If he met with Ruby, if he met with James File, he's an accomplice. He's not off scot-free. But he's not the person who pulled the trigger. Now, he leaves the school book depository, and he heads home and gets a gun, and he's heading out. Now, where's he going? Well, I believe he was going to a Cuban safe house that he had visited many times before with the Fair Play for Cuba people. I think that's where he was going to cool down and try to get out of town. Now, meanwhile, I believe that the Dallas police were involved in some way for 3 reasons. Number one, they let Jack Ruby in. Nobody knows how, but he was let in. Number 2, they destroyed every note of his interrogation immediately, completely. Number 3, the rifle the lady checked in may not have been the right one. Number 4, that description of Lee Harvey Oswald was put out in 14 minutes. Nobody could have acted that fast. And within 24 hours, the FBI saying, we have our man. They have never done that in any other case in their history. So I believe that the Dallas Police Department are involved. Now, maybe some of these guys were told to go find Lee Harvey Oswald because they knew where he lived and eliminate him. Maybe J.W. Tippit, the officer, was going to do that. The witnesses that saw J.W. Tippit said it didn't look like Oswald. The bullets did not match Oswald's gun. 4 out of the 6 witnesses were killed within a short period of time after Lee Harvey Oswald was killed. They were killed. 2 of them went on the lam, and to this day, they thought their lives, or to the day they died, thought their lives were in jeopardy for having witnessed somebody else shooting Tippit other than Oswald. Now, interesting side note here. That Ruth lady, or the lady that was supposedly one of the shooters, had another assassin in the car with her. I think it was Diaz. And they were heading out of town, and they picked up 2 guys. They picked up 2 guys, and on the road that they're going on, and where this source comes from, I do not know, one of the guys in the back seat said, I shot a cop. She pulls over to the side of the road, said, you have to bury all the weapons. So they get out, they start digging, they bury all the weapons, throw them in. She shoots the 2 guys, puts them in the hole, buries them. That's where Tippit's murderers are supposedly buried to this day. Now, who that woman was, and if that's a true story, that, once again, is coming from the extensive, intricate research that these authors and these researchers doing tens of thousands of hours of research have uncovered. I would think that the Warren Commission would blush in shame at their investigation compared to what these people have done. Now let's go to the aftermath of all this. What did all this accomplish? Well, the aftermath simply was this. We can't print our own money, we know that. We had the Vietnam War. The draft came in. I was one of the draftees. I was 18. I have a feeling if I had went, I had a deferment because my wife had a younger child. They didn't want to pay for her. But after that memorandum 274 that LBJ signed in, the draft started. I got mine the day I was 18. I'd have been in there, and I got a feeling I wouldn't be talking to you now if I had went. Now, out of that came 58,000, 200,000 casualties of young men, destroying their families. We have 300,000 wounded. We have 250,000 Vietnamese soldiers died. Another 500,000 wounded. We have 1.5 million Laotians and Cambodians and Viet Cong died. Almost 3 million people died because JFK was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. That's the ripple effect. That's why I'm here. So much death, so much destruction. Of course, people made money. Huey Helicopter built thousands of them. LBJ became rich beyond imagination. The military complex got their war. The businesses that support that got rich. We lost Camelot. It destroyed Camelot. We lost our faith in our government's institutions, the FBI, the CIA, maybe even the Secret Service, definitely the Federal Reserve, and most of our politicians. I think the polls on Congress and the Senate are at historic lows. They have kept this shielded from us as if we were too naive or too vulnerable to handle the truth. So they were going to keep it for us for 60 years. They are still withholding 4,300 documents in the archives that they will not release. You know why? Could cause World War III. So that's the aftermath. What else? Well, there were 103 people that were eliminated and assassinated within a couple of years after the assassination, and they put those odds at like 1 in 100 billion. Of these people that you're seeing, there's 3 pages of those, by the way, having been mysteriously or prematurely died from, you can imagine how many different kinds of deaths, but were eliminated within a couple of years to make sure that the narrative of a lone gunman stayed the narrative of a lone gunman. I don't know if any of you remember Dorothy Kilgallen, but Dorothy Kilgallen was an icon in reporting media. She was a big star on The Price is Right. But first of all, she was a reporter. And if you can find a picture of the next one over, I think, of Dorothy Kilgallen, wherever that is, she had went to interview Jack Ruby. She was the only reporter that was allowed to take him into a judge's chambers and interview Ruby not once but twice for a half hour, maybe longer, the second time. When she did that, Ruby told her that he thought his cell was bugged and it was the only place that he could talk. He told her the story, how he did the telegram just 15 minutes before so it would look like to one of his strippers sending her $25, so it would look like it was a crime of passion. How he was led in down, the driveway to assassinate Lee Harvey Oswald because he had been commanded to do so by his superiors. We're talking Carlos Marcellos, Traficante, and Giancana. He had 72 phone calls from mob figures in the 2 months previous to the assassination. Now, he told her the whole story. She wrote all the notes, had it all done, told her producer and her makeup artist and a neighbor that she was going to break the Kennedy case wide open and blow the lid off of it. She was found the next day, poisoned by 2 or 3 different barbiturates in alcohol. Not one, but 2 or 3. And her husband, who was a mob associate, was never convicted or tried for it. But all of her notes and all of her papers went missing. Now, I don't know about you, but when 103 people end up dying prematurely with odds, I think they're over 101 to 100 billion. I think it's a trillion. And a star dies prematurely at a very young age, and all of her notes are gone suspiciously, I would say I'd call that a cover-up. Now, if you took any of the evidence that we talked about today, and you took it to a jury to convince them that beyond a reasonable doubt that this was a conspiracy, and there's the investigation, I think it was 1968 or 7, and by the way, more people died when they were going to go to that. You got handsome Johnny Roselli found in an oil drum with his arms, hands cut off, and legs. You got Giancana, who was shot. You got Meyer Lansky. 7 people were killed before they could testify in 1967 or 8 on that assassination of Kennedy. At the end of the report, they said, we think it's a conspiracy. We just don't know who. So, the aftermath is the tragedy of this one man's death. Loss of faith in our institutions, loss of respect for our presidential office. They don't respect it anymore. Used to be when they were elected. Once they were elected, everybody got behind them, and the media respected them, and they were not criticized and ridiculed. No more. That's gone. We're $34 trillion in debt. How much of that is interest? I'd really like to figure out. We don't have the America we had back when John F. Kennedy was president and he ushered in Camelot. All because he had too high of ideals and was going up against way too many powerful groups that had a different idea and different agenda. They were the World War II group. He was a young, new idea president. And they wanted to do things the way they had always done them. So, was it a lone nut gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald? Or was it, as I am suggesting in this podcast, was it a vast conspiracy so big, so embedded with very, very powerful people, from the president to the FBI to the CIA, to cover it up, get rid of witnesses, keep the lid on this to protect reputations of 3 presidents, LBJ, Richard Nixon, and H.W. Bush, who was CIA agent back then, and one of our closest allies, Israel. They had to keep the lid on it. They didn't have a choice. They could not let that out. Too many powerful people. There are probably still some powerful people out there. I just believe that maybe after 60 years, everybody is ready and willing to examine and decide on the truth as they see it beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do today. I want you to go to JFK The Verdict. That's JFK The Verdict. And I want you to vote. Vote lone gunman, if you like that idea, that the Warren Commission. And by the way, they're pushing it so hard right now. They had a special on one of the agents that said, "Oh, no. There was no conspiracy, lone gunman." How he would know, I don't know, since they left most of the Secret Service agents that were supposed to run alongside back at Love Field. Then they've got a day in the life of the president, and at the end of it, they got a big banner. Oh, it was a lone gunman, absolutely. Then we got on NBC, Today Show. Oh, here's it today, 22nd of November. JFK was assassinated, but a lone gunman did it. And they take you up to the school book depository and show you all around, and curator says, "Yep, lone gunman." Then they go down to the street and they ask the people on the street. It's funny. Was it a lone gunman or assassin? Assassin. Was a conspiracy, I mean. Was it a lone gunman or a conspiracy? Conspiracy. Everyone they ask, conspiracy. I think the numbers are something like 70 to 85% of the Americans believe that JFK was killed by a conspiracy. That should be enough to get every document, every last single document that they are holding up. And they should open another inquiry, another investigation, and get to the bottom of this and clean this table off so we can lay a new set and start over. Because until this Kennedy thing is put to rest and we know exactly what happened and everybody can see it in black and white and it's transparent, if they're going to keep dresses for another 35 years, if they are going to hide all the CIA and FBI documents pertaining to Lee Harvey Oswald, people are always going to reserve the opinion that it could have been a conspiracy. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I want you to go to the verdict, jfktheverdict.com, and I want you to vote. Please do that so that we can get your opinion on this. And on our next podcast, we'll definitely give you those numbers of what percentage voted that it's a lone gunman and who wasn't. So one other last thing I'd like to say before we allow some calls. If anybody out there would like to call, that would be terrific. I'll be happy to answer whatever questions I can. And one thing I want to do, though, before I do that, is run a couple questions by you. If it was, in fact, a lone gunman, why are they not releasing all the documents that show that? Why is Lee Harvey Oswald standing in the front door of that building? Why are there so many confessions like the one of, who's the gentleman? He wrote a confession. He was a CIA agent for many years, and he confessed to being one of the people in Dallas that day that helped kill Kennedy. And those are the kind of questions that I'd like to ask. And I had a whole bunch of them, but I guess I put those in a file that I can't seem to find, of questions that I would ask if I were to believe in the lone gunman theory. And of course, why would they keep him from having a phone call? Why did he not have any gunpowder on him? On and on and on. But if you get a chance, call in. If not, that'll probably just come close to wrapping up the show. I'm trying to think right now of anything else that I may have missed that you guys should know about. Let me take a quick look. I'll tell you who it is. It's E. Howard Hunt. He confessed on his deathbed. You remember him from the break-in of Watergate. He said, anything that the White House wants me to do, I consider law. And he gave a deathbed confession to his son, who said that he was involved. He was in Dallas, and the CIA was involved, and so forth and so on. And I had a list of the guys that he said was with him. Let me see if I can find it here, if we got a minute. Okay, here's the guys he said was involved in the assassination when he was there. Lyndon Baines Johnson, Cord Meyer, that's the CIA agent that basically Kennedy was having an affair with his wife, Mary Meyer, who also ended up dead. Dave Atlee Phillips, he was the CIA agent that handled the Bay of Pigs and was recruited by William Harvey, CIA, along with a Cuban exile, that may be our Diaz guy. William Harvey, CIA agent. By the way, David Atlee Phillips had an interesting file. It's called a zip file. That was basically the file they used instead of Mongoose to plan the assassination. That guy right there, David Atlee Phillips, used that file, the zip file, to plan and execute the murder of the president, according to E. Howard Hunt. Yep. Now, the other guys he said were Frank Sturgis, CIA operative, David Morales, that's another Cuban CIA hitman, Lucien Sarti, that's our French Connection guy. That's basically who he's got down as his accomplices. Now, James Stiles also confessed to it completely many times. Documentaries all over on that. And Marlos Marcellus, the godfather of New Orleans, confessed to his jailmate 3 times that he killed Kennedy, had Kennedy killed, and said he'd like to do it again if he had a chance. And he didn't know that the guy they had put in there with him was a undercover agent. So that's all on tape. The FBI won't give us. And those kind of things are out there, and there's a long, long list on that memo of why we should be asking questions. And until those questions are answered, I myself personally are going to fall into the conspiracy category. Do I have room for reconsidering that? Yeah, I do. If they can prove to me and answer some of those questions and explain how these researchers have come up with everything they came up with over the last 60 years, if they can explain it to my satisfaction, I'll be happy to become a lone nut gunman theorist. Until then, this is Scott Goldsmith with Goldsmith Weighs In, thanking you for your time. I really appreciate it. Hopefully it was interesting, and hopefully we shed a few new light on the assassination of one of our greatest presidents, JFK. Now, one last thing. RFK was also killed 5 years later, and RFK, I believe, was killed by Mickey Cohen's bodyguard because he had powder burns in the back of his neck and on his shirt. And Sirhan was a few feet away from him, fired all 8 shots, but they found 13 shots in the doors panels of the pantry. And a woman in polka dot runs out screaming, "We got him, we got him." There were 3 CIA agents there, and Mickey Cohen's bodyguard or security agent that worked out at the track that he owned in Los Angeles. I think it's Santa Anita, I'm not sure. But that's going to be a whole new show. We'll do that on the anniversary of RFK, but I think he's part of that collateral damage we just discussed. So once again, thank you. We're going to sign off and appreciate your listening. Does the world seem to be getting more and more unsettled and uncertain every month? Wars that could spill over at any time, extreme and unpredictable weather, aging power grids going down, wildfires, social unrest, just to name a few. Do what I do. Don't be scared, just be prepared. Go to yourlifeboat.net. That's yourlifeboat.net. For as little as $1 a day, you can have the peace of mind and security that no matter what emergency may arise, you'll always have food on the table. Food is life. That's living insurance for $1 a day. See what they have to offer, but please don't delay. You never know when trouble's going to show up. That's yourlifeboat.net. Or call us at 1-800-713-4628. That's 1-800-713-4628. Again, 1-800-713-4628.